Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into why learning English is such a big deal in the world today.
Yeah, it's a pretty important topic for sure.
Definitely. So our source material for this is a podcast episode.
Oh, cool.
It's called Why Learning English is Essential in Today's World.
Okay.
And it's from a show called Learning English Podcast.
Got it.
And the episode features two language enthusiasts, Marco and Catherine, and they really get into the nitty-gritty of why English matters.
I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so I think we all know that English is like a pretty widely spoken language.
Right.
But did you know that over 1.5 billion people speak it?
Wow.
That's like almost a quarter of the entire planet.
That's incredible.
I know, right? It's like having this instant network of people you can connect with all over the world.
I've always been fascinated by how English acts as this kind of bridge language,
Yeah, totally. Like it allows people from all different backgrounds and cultures to communicate and understand each other.
Exactly. Marco actually emphasizes that point in the podcast episode. He says that English is like the common thread that weaves together diverse cultures.
And did you know that English is an official language in 67 countries?
Wow. I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah, it's a lot. Just imagine all the places you could travel to and be able to communicate with people.
The travel possibilities are endless.
Totally. But it's not just about travel.
Right.
English is also super important for international business, diplomacy,
Oh, absolutely.
and even things like technology and science.
Yeah, it's the language of so many different fields.
It really is. So think about it this way. If you know English, you're opening up a ton of doors for yourself.
It's like having a key that unlocks a world of opportunities.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about how English connects cultures
Right.
and how it's important for things like business and diplomacy. But what about education?
Whoa, that's another huge area where English plays a crucial role.
Yeah, totally. Like, think about all the top universities in the world, Harvard, Oxford, MIT.
Yeah.
They all use English as the primary language of instruction.
And Catherine actually mentions that in the podcast.
She does.
She says that knowing English opens doors to some of the best educational institutions on the planet.
And it's not just about getting into those universities.
Right.
Think about applying for scholarships, collaborating on international research projects.
Yeah. No.
All of that is made possible by knowing English.
It's like a passport to a world-class education.
Exactly. And then once you've got that education, think about the job market.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
So many global companies require English proficiency,
Yeah.
even if they're not based in an English-speaking country.
That's so true. And the podcast actually touches on that, too.
They do.
They talk about how English has become essential for career advancement in fields like IT, marketing, finance, you name it.
Yeah, pretty much any field you can think of, if you want to get ahead, you need to know English.
It's the language of the global marketplace.
It is. Okay, so we've covered how English impacts education and careers. But let's not forget about the fun stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Think about all the amazing movies, TV shows, and music you can enjoy in their original language.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about knowing English.
Me too. Like, I love being able to watch a movie without subtitles.
Right. And really understand the nuances of the dialogue.
Yeah, you pick up on so much more when you're not relying on a translation.
And the humor. It's so much funnier when you can understand the jokes in the original language.
Exactly. Marco actually talks about that in the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
He mentions shows like Friends and The Office, and how much he loves being able to understand the humor without having to rely on subtitles or dubbing.
It's like a whole different level of enjoyment.
It really is. And speaking of enjoyment, let's not forget about the social aspect of learning English.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Think about being able to make friends from all over the world.
Yeah. And learning their cultures firsthand.
Exactly. It's like opening up your social circle to an entire planet.
And English is the key that unlocks those connections.
It really is. Okay, so we've talked about how English connects cultures, boosts your education and career prospects, and lets you enjoy entertainment and make friends from all over the world.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is, but you know what really blows my mind is the idea that learning English can actually change the way you think.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that.
Well, Marco and Catherine briefly touch on this concept called linguistic relativity.
Good.
And it's this idea that the language we speak actually shapes how we perceive and understand the world.
So by learning English, you're not just learning a new language, you're potentially expanding your entire worldview.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a whole new set of tools to process information and make sense of the world around you.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it? But, of course, learning any new language can be challenging.
Right.
So, what do Marco and Catherine have to say about overcoming those challenges?
Well, they're both big believers in the power of persistence and not giving up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Catherine actually talks about how she used to get really discouraged when she hit a plateau in her language learning.
I can relate to that. It can be so frustrating when you feel like you're not making any progress.
Exactly. But she says that it's important to remember that setbacks are a natural part of the process.
So, it's about pushing through those tough moments and not being too hard on yourself.
That's exactly it. And, another challenge a lot of people face is the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Like, I know I used to be terrified of speaking English in front of native speakers.
I get that. It can be intimidating.
Totally. But what's Marco's take on that?
Well, he has this great analogy. He compares learning a language to learning how to ride a bike.
Interesting.
He says, you're going to fall a few times, you're going to wobble, you might even scrape your knee.
Okay, I'm following you.
But he says, eventually, with practice and perseverance, you'll find your balance and you'll be cruising down the road with confidence.
I love that analogy.
Me too. So true.
Yeah, it's like you can't expect to become fluent overnight.
Right.
It takes time, effort, and a willingness to embrace those mistakes along the way.
And to not be afraid to put yourself out there and practice, even if you're not perfect.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
from the global impact of English to the personal growth it can foster.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up this first part, I'm curious,
Okay.
what's resonating with you the most so far?
Well, what really stands out to me is how English acts as this incredible thread that weaves together so many different aspects of our lives. It's the language of science, diplomacy, business, entertainment, personal connection.
Yeah,
It's a tool for communication, collaboration, and understanding.
it really is.
And the fact that it's something that's accessible to anyone willing to put in the effort.
I love that. So we've established that English has this incredible power to connect us across cultures and continents.
Right.
But in our next segment, we're going to delve deeper into how English is shaping specific fields.
Ooh, I'm excited for that.
Me too. We'll be exploring the role of English in science, technology, and the arts.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into why learning English matters.
Can't wait. Okay, so we're going to be diving into those specific fields, right?
Okay.
What really strikes me is that English isn't just a passive tool for communication. It's more like it actively shapes how we approach and understand these subjects.
Actively shapes. Can you give me an example?
Well, think about science, for instance.
Okay.
Most scientific journals are published in English.
Right.
So researchers all over the world, even those whose first language isn't English, need to be fluent in order to stay up to date.
So it's not just reading those research papers. It's about being able to, like, add to the conversation.
Exactly. Imagine you're presenting your research at a big international conference.
Yeah.
Or you're working on a project with scientists from different countries. English is what brings everyone together.
It's like the glue.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's not just science either. English is also really dominant in tech, things like software development and AI.
Yeah, I was reading about that. Coding relies on English keywords. So much of it is in English.
It is.
Mm.
And when you think about how global these tech companies are, English is essential.
It's almost like English is the language of innovation now.
I like that. It's a good way to put it. And it's not just the technical stuff either. Think about the impact technology has on culture.
Right.
So much of what we see online, whether it's social media or streaming, is in English.
Which brings us to the arts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Marco and Catherine both talked about this, how English is like a global platform for creative expression through music, film, literature, you name it.
Yeah, think about Hollywood films. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And English language music is popular all over the world.
Right. And we can't forget about authors like Shakespeare, who are still read and studied today.
It's amazing how English can connect people through art.
Yeah, it really is. And that connection is what makes learning English so rewarding. It opens up so many doors, not just for your career or education, but
Yeah.
for like experiencing the world.
And that brings us back to linguistic relativity.
Oh, right.
We talked about it earlier, but by learning another language, we could be opening our minds to completely new ways of thinking.
Wow.
We're not just learning new words, we're maybe changing how we see the world.
So it's like a mental workout.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about how English is important in all these different areas, but let's get practical.
Okay, sounds good.
What tips did Marco and Catherine have for people who are just starting to learn English?
Yeah, what advice did they have?
They both said that consistency is key.
Yeah.
Even just spending 15 minutes a day practicing can make a huge difference.
It's like working out a muscle. You got to keep using it.
Exactly. But there are so many resources out there, it can be overwhelming to know where to start.
Oh, yeah, totally. Apps, websites, textbooks, how do you choose?
Well, Marco and Catherine both recommend finding resources that match your learning style. So if you learn best by watching things, try movies or documentaries with subtitles.
Right.
If you're more auditory, maybe podcasts or audiobooks would be better.
Good advice, good advice. But what about speaking? I know that can be scary for some people.
It can be. But Marco recommends finding a language partner, someone to practice speaking with.
Oh, okay.
And Catherine says that it's super important to not be afraid of messing up.
Easier said than done.
I know, but she says that making mistakes means you're pushing yourself and learning.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And I think that's what we should all take away from this.
Yeah.
Learning English isn't just about being fluent, it's about embracing the process.
The ups and downs and everything in between.
Exactly. So we've explored the global impact of English, looked at its role in different fields, and talked about some practical learning tips.
Yeah, we covered a lot.
We did. But before we move on, what do you want our listener to really remember?
Yeah, what's the most important takeaway?
I think it boils down to this. Learning English isn't just about a skill, it's about opening yourself up to a world of possibilities.
Oh, I like that.
It's about connecting with people from different cultures, understanding different viewpoints, and broadening your own perspective.
It's a journey of personal growth.
Absolutely. And it can be a lot of fun. So, as we head into our last part, let's think about the listener's personal journey.
Okay,
What questions might they have? How can we help them take that first step?
great. Let's dive in. It's amazing how learning English can have such a profound impact on a personal level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not just about the language itself. It's about the ripple effects it has on your whole life.
Totally. And Catherine actually brings this up in the podcast. She talks about how learning English gave her a huge boost in confidence.
Oh, yeah.
Not just in her ability to communicate, but like in every aspect of her life.
It's like it unlocked this inner strength.
Exactly. She felt more comfortable taking risks, trying new things,
Yeah.
putting herself out there.
And think about it, learning a language takes a ton of discipline and perseverance.
Yeah, for sure.
Those are skills you can apply to anything.
Oh, absolutely. Like reaching a tough goal at work or learning a new hobby, even sticking to a workout routine.
Yeah, it's like a training ground for personal growth.
Totally. And we can't forget about the pure joy of discovery.
Right.
Marco describes it as unlocking a whole new world of books, music, movies.
Like seeing the world in color for the first time.
I get that. I remember the first time I read a whole novel in English without needing a dictionary. I felt like I could conquer anything.
It's those little victories that keep you going.
Yeah, every new word, every conversation, every cultural barrier you break down.
It all builds up to this incredible sense of accomplishment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what advice would we give to someone who's inspired, but maybe a little intimidated by the whole learning English thing?
I'd say start small. Don't put too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
Set realistic goals, find resources you actually enjoy using, and be kind to yourself.
Great advice. And don't be afraid to connect with other learners.
Oh, yeah. Find a community online or in person.
It makes the journey so much more fun and you can support each other.
Exactly. Sharing those experiences makes a big difference.
So to sum it all up, learning English is about so much more than just grammar and vocabulary.
It's about growth connection, expanding your horizons,
Embracing a world of possibilities.
and it's a journey anyone can take.
That's right. So, listener, take that first step. Embrace the challenge.
The world is waiting to hear your voice.
Beautifully said. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of English language learning.
We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, and maybe even a little life-changing.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep connecting.